colleagues, and all dear participants. My sincere regards. Goddess Saraswati is an embodiment of wisdom, knowledge, and learning. Let's seek her blessings in all spheres of life. Now, I request our respected Principal Dr. Tandikar sir, VC ma'am, to lighten the lamp in front of Goddess Saraswati and formally inaugurate the workshop. Our Honorable VC ma'am will virtually be with us. We are going to worship Goddess Saraswati to bless us for this 5-day workshop.
हाँ क्या ठीक है कुछ साफ ये लाइट आ रहा था अभी अच्छा लाइट क्यों नहीं आ रही देखिए चलो
Thank you, everyone. Now I request you all to kindly stand up in your positions for the Rajya about to be played. Thank you once again. Uh, as we all know, Government Digvijay College is one of the premier institutions of Chhattisgarh, founded by the visionary personality, late Maharaja Digvijay Dasji on 13 July 1957 to fulfill his dream of a center of higher education in Rajnandgaon. He donated his own palace for the college to establish a center of higher education in Rajnandgaon. The college keeps fidelity to his vision of an educational institution with social responsibility and commitment to humanity as a whole. From 1957, the college was being run as private college and was taken over by government in 1973. And the college has recently, in 2018, celebrated its Diamond Jubilee year. Uh, We are organizing this workshop in collaboration with Indira Kala Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya Khairagarh. Indira Kala Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya Khairagarh was established in the year 1956 and it is situated in the Khairagarh township of Chhattisgarh state of India. It is a different type of university where higher education is imparted in field of music, dance, fine arts, and theatre. So there's just a video with some
Just
pics
member.
for the glimpses of these two videos that is to be played. So have a look at that video.
वो देख थोड़ा रुकते रहो, वो देखो कुछ कर।
My apologies for the thank you everyone. Now I would like to invite our respected head Department of English, Dr. Anita Shankar Madam, for welcome address. Madam, over to you.
Good morning, all. Honorable Chief Guest Dr. Aruna Palta Ma'am, Vice Chancellor, Hemchand Yadav University, Durg, respected Principal and Patron of this workshop, Dr. K. L. Tandekar Sir, respected I.D. Tiwari Sir, Professor and Head, Department of English and Registrar, Indira Kala Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya, Khairagarh, our invited guest speakers, Dr. Prantik Banerjee, Professor of English, Hislop College, Nagpur; Dr. Somali Gupta, Professor of English, Government BYT Autonomous College, Durg; Dr. Anup Kumar Tiwari, Assistant Professor of English, NIT Raipur; Dr. Madhu Kamra, Professor of English, Durga College, Raipur; Dr. Jyoti Patil, Principal, Renuka College, Nagpur; Dr. Anil Srivastava, Professor of Zoology, Government VYT Autonomous College, Durg; Dr. Manish Srivastava, Professor of English, Guru Ghasidas University, Bilaspur; Dr. P. N. Sanesar, Assistant Professor of English, Government Autonomous PG College, Chhindwara; Dr. Savita Singh, Professor of English, Government Nagarjuna Science College, Raipur; and Dr. G. A. Ghanshyam, Professor of English and OSD, Higher Education Department, Chhattisgarh. My dear colleagues, research scholars, and students, I, on behalf of our team, warmly welcome you all to this national level virtual workshop. The themes being covered are varied, ranging from determination of objectives of research to funding of research. Research, which has always been the focus point of higher education, has received fresh impetus in the new Education Policy 2020, which envisages at undergraduate level itself a bachelor's degree with research if the student completes a rigorous research project in his or her major areas of study, thereby introducing research in undergraduate level itself. Knowingly and unknowingly, we exercise the elements of research in daily life, be it choosing food in the menu of a restaurant or searching items of interest online. But when it comes doing research within the four corners of academic world, one finds himself or herself overwhelmed with information, restricted as to the manner of documentation, finding means for funding the research and the applicability of the research initiative. With this workshop, we are hopeful that the wide ranging topics being covered would empower the participants in their research pursuits. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would like to request Professor I.D. Tiwari, sir, for the welcome address. Sir, over to you. So kindly unmute yourself, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for asking me to say a few words. Uh, Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University, Palta Madam, and uh, Honorable Principal of the College, Tandekar Saab, Head of the Department of English, and Professor Nelu Srivastav, Anita Saha, and Soni ji, and my dear other friends who are there in the department. It delights me to note that today we are here with a joint program because this is being organized jointly by Digvijay College and Indira Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya Khairagarh. And this could be possible because of the two reasons. Due to the dynamic leadership which is provided by the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Palta Madam, and we as scholars and as students of literature have marked it well that since she joined this university, there has been uh, a good rise in the academic activities. It is under her leadership that at least the Department of English has been granted as the center of research, and they have started this activity in the best possible manner. Adding to that, the most interesting thing that happened with the college is joining of my friend Tandekar Saab. He has the benchmark of his excellence. Wherever he goes, he ensures it that some quality work is done. Whether it was Raigad or it was Dongargarh, these are the two colleges at least I know that where he has done wonderful things. And with his joining this college, such activities like the one which we are engaged with now, these activities have picked up, and I'm sure that many more programs of this kind are in the pipeline, and students would be benefited by all these programs. I too have to play a little role in this uh, program which is being organized as a co-coordinator and also as an advisor to the staff there. They are lovely people, and because they got this opportunity, they are reaping the opportunity to the best of their capacity. May God bless us all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Now, for the introductory speech, I would like to invite Dr. Helu Srivastav, madam. Madam, over to you.
Yeah, a very good morning to all the dignitaries present here. Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. Aruna Palta ma'am, uh, our Principal sir and patron of this workshop, Dr. K.L. Tandekar sir, respected Dr. I.D. Tiwari sir, Professor and Head, Department of English, and Registrar Indira Kala Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya, our head of the department, respected Dr. Anita Shankar ma'am, all our exceptionally astute speakers, my colleagues, research scholars, and students. Once again, I warmly welcome you all on behalf of the Department of English, Government Digvijay Autonomous PG College Rajnandgaon, to this workshop. This workshop is organized in collaboration with Indira Kala Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya, Khairagarh. The theme of this workshop is Basics of Research Methodology. Research, as the name suggests, is researching in any field of knowledge. It is a detailed and minute study of a subject at uh, in a systematic manner to discover some new information or reach at a new understanding and conclusion. So research can be called as a probe into a totally new concept or on a concept which is already known to us. Moreover, research can be done by anyone, be it an academician, research scholar, a professional, or even a non-professional person. When a cook wishes to invent a new recipe, he has to undergo lots of research for ingredients to get a new and delicious taste. Similarly, when a musician has to create a new musical composition, he also has to do lots of research and toil on perfect notes, pitch, and rhythm to get a mellifluous composition. Thus, research is an original contribution to any stock of knowledge for its advancement. But when we talk about academic research, it is intended solely for the purpose of creation of knowledge or enhancement of knowledge. And the quality of academic research has a direct impact on the quality of teaching and learning in classroom, which benefits not only to the students but to the society and the entire country as a whole. But during recent times, when we look around in the field of research in India, we find that there are many obstacles in the path of quality research. With the exception of a few quality researches and research institutes, the majority of researches and research institutes, they present a very bleak picture in terms of quality. So the objective of this workshop is to provide our students and research scholars an in-depth understanding, comprehension, and updated knowledge regarding qualities of good research. The workshop will focus on some of the very important areas of research, like how to plan research, collection of data, interdisciplinary research, contemporary literary research, ranking and importance of journals for publication, research funding agencies, and many other areas related to research. All our speakers are great scholars of repute, and I'm sure that all the participants will be highly benefited by this workshop. At last, once again, I welcome all the dignitaries and participants in this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, for the presidential address, I would like to invite our respected principal, Dr. K.L. Tandekar, sir. Sir, we invite you for the presidential address.
थैंक यू मैडम। माननीय कुलपति जी, आज के इस वर्चुअल वर्कशॉप के मुख्य अतिथि हैं। नेशनल लेवल वर्चुअल वर्कशॉप ऑन बेसिक ऑफ रिसर्च methodology organized by Department of English and IQAC, Government Digvijay Autonomous PG College, Rajnandgaon, in collaboration with Indira Kala Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya, Khairagarh. 5 days नेशनल वर्चुअल इस वर्कशॉप में हमारे बीच उपस्थित है हेमचंद यादव विश्वविद्यालय के माननीय कुलपति महोदया, महाविद्यालय परिवार आपका बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता है। वर्कशॉप को कंडक्ट करने में डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ इंग्लिश एचओडी डॉक्टर अनीता शंकर और सभी प्राध्यापकगण, डॉक्टर नीलू श्रीवास्तव, श्री चंदन सोनी, डॉक्टर अनीता शाह, मंजरी सिंह, और विशेष रूप से इस वर्चुअल वर्कशॉप को समन्वय दोनों संस्थाओं के बीच समन्वय के माध्यम से आयोजित करने में विशेष सहयोग हमारे आदरणीय अग्रज डॉक्टर ID तिवारी सर, जो रजिस्ट्रार भी हैं इंदिरा कला विश्वविद्यालय, उनका विशेष रूप से हम आभार व्यक्त करते हैं। साथ ही इस वर्कशॉप के उद्देश्य पर, वर्कशॉप के आयोजन और 5 दिनों तक वर्कशॉप में विभिन्न विशेषज्ञों के द्वारा जिन विषयों पर महत्वपूर्ण जानकारी दी जानी है, उनके विस्तृत चर्चा हमारे अनीता शंकर और डॉक्टर नीलू श्रीवास्तव जी ने यहाँ की है। मैं अधिक समय ना लेते हुए यही अपेक्षा करूँगा कि जो भी प्राध्यापक, शोधार्थी इस वेबिनार में विद्यार्थी जुड़े हुए हैं, वे इस रिसर्च मेथोडोलॉजी वर्कशॉप में महत्वपूर्ण जानकारियों को अवश्य प्राप्त करें। हमारा उद्देश्य है, जैसा कि माननीय कुलपति जी का विशेष प्रयास कि हर महाविद्यालय में रिसर्च और प्रोजेक्ट कार्य, गुणवत्तापूर्ण कार्य पर विशेष ध्यान दिया जाए, उसी परिप्रेक्ष्य में यह वर्कशॉप का आयोजन शासकीय दिग्विजय महाविद्यालय और इंदिरा कला संगीत विश्वविद्यालय आपस में सहमति से कर रहा है। सभी स्पीकर, विशेषज्ञ और इस कार्यक्रम में जुड़े सभी प्राध्यापक, शोधार्थियों को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद सर, प्राचार्य महोदय का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद उनके आशीर्वचन के लिए। Now I would like to invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor Madam Dr. Ranapalta Ma'am for guest of honor address. Ma'am.
Very good morning to one and all present in the inaugural session of the National Virtual Workshop on Basics of Research Methodology, organized by the Department of English and IQAC of Government Digvijay Autonomous PG College, Rajnandgaon, in collaboration with Indira Kala Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya, Khairagarh, Chhattisgarh. As you all know that both these institutions are not only the pride of Chhattisgarh state, but are also recognized at national level too. I was really highly impressed by the way you performed your inaugural session. You started your inaugural session with virtual Saraswati Vandana, and I really appreciate your gesture. And I recognize the presence of the dynamic principal of the institution, Dr. K.L. Tandikar, conveners, Dr. I.D. Tiwari and Dr. Anita Shankar, organizing secretary, Dr. Neelu Srivastav, and the entire organizing committee of this virtual workshop, all the learned speakers from across the nation, Dr. Prantik Banerjee and Dr. I.D. Tiwari, who are the speakers for today's session, and all the learned professors and participants. I know almost all the resource persons you have invited for this workshop, and I'm very happy to say that all of them are very, very learned, knowledgeable, as well as very good speakers too. So this workshop will be an academic feast for all the participants. One of your resource persons, Dr. Jyoti Patil, I happened to meet her just, say a month back, and I was really impressed by her simplicity and also by her very good cooperative attitude, and he seems to be a very good academician too. So your choice of resource persons is really very good. I would like to congratulate the organizing team for this. I've seen the entire brochure of the workshop and all the topics which you have selected with utmost care. And this is now the ball is in the court of the participants. If they attend the workshop wholeheartedly, definitely they will be benefited a lot from this workshop. If a researcher understands the research methodology, which is the systematic roadmap, definitely he'll be able to accomplish his research work very well. And I can say this with confidence that if he or she will have no confusions in the entire course of his research work. An old English proverb says, well begun is half done. So if one knows the research methodology in the beginning phase of the research work only, the researcher should place himself or herself in the midway of the research journey. Research methodology, as we all know, is nothing but a systematic way of solving research problems. It is a science of studying how research is done scientifically. Essentially, it is the procedure by which researchers go about their work of describing, evaluating, and predicting phenomena. It provides training in choosing methods, materials,
या सामने रख के
scientific
देखें क्या
tools, and techniques relevant to the solution of the problem.
है?
Thus, research methodology provides a detailed plan that helps to
नहीं
keep
ऐसा सामने
researchers on track, making the process smooth, effective, and manageable.
नहीं है।
I would like to end with the quote of Albert Zent
देखो ना
Georgi, who said that research is to see what everybody
अच्छा
else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought. Once again, thanking the entire college family for providing your prestigious platform to share my views with you all. Here I am, and I wish a very grand success to this entire national virtual workshop. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, Jai Chhattisgarh.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your kind words. We really appreciate your presence, that you spared your precious time from your busy schedule. And we wish that you could continue with this workshop for all the sessions. But we know that as you are really tight with the time, so for vote of thanks, I would like to invite Professor Chandan Soni, sir. Chandan Soni, sir. Professor Chandan Soni, sir.
हम्म।
Thank you so much, ma'am.
स्पीकर
Our
स्पीकर बंद
deepest gratitude to the entire English department as well as the college family, our principal sir, and the Indira Vishwavidyalaya. We are deeply, it is a great honor for us that you accepted to be the chief guest of this program. And thank you so much for your kind blessings, appreciation, and your precious time. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Welcome.
Regards.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite Ms. Aishwarya Srivastav, student of MA English Literature 4th semester, for the brief bio note of our invited guest speaker, respected Dr. Prantik Banerjee, sir.
Good morning, one and all, teachers and professors. I'm Ishwarya Srivastava, a student of MA English Literature, Government Digvijay College. I welcome you all in this national level virtual workshop on the basics of research methodology. Taking forward our workshop, I, on the behalf of everyone present here, heartily welcome our speaker, Dr. Prantik Banerjee. Dr. Prantik Banerjee, Professor, Department of English, Hislop College, Nagpur, holds the administrative experience as Vice Principal for 3 years and Coordinator of NAC and IQAC for 10 years. He has in-depth knowledge in the areas of cultural studies, energy humanities, medical humanities, memory studies, and many other intellectual subjects. Not only he has the expertise in this subject, he also designed new PG courses for 3 universities. Besides this, he had been an eminent speaker and resource person at several international and national conferences. This was just a glimpse. His accomplishments are uncountable. He is also a member of Board of Studies, RTM Nagpur University, member of Board of Studies of Homi Baba State University, Mumbai, PhD supervisor for Rashtra Sant Tukadoji Maharaj Nagpur University, expert on the drafting committee of NCCI National Higher Education Policy, external advisor of IQAC of reputed college and university. He is a certified HRD trainer from TCS Bangalore and also conducted several teacher and corporate training programs. Along with his credentials, he contributed in research by publishing 5 books, an 8-book chapter, and 41 research papers in reviewed journal. One of his renowned books is Cultural Studies. He has immensely contributed in the field of literature by publishing short stories and poems. He is awarded with International Award CLR Best Fiction Writer 2021 and Best Teacher on Campus. The Times of India Nagpur edition. So, with all the due respect, on behalf of Department of English, Government Digvijay College, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Prantik Banerjee to express his views on the topic Are You a Paper Typer?
Thank you. Uh, First of all, let's do a system check. Am I audible?
Sir, perfectly.
Yeah, right. Um, it's very nice to be introduced by a student, especially in a research workshop which says back to basics. And I think when we say back to basics, we are talking about, trying to inculcate a scientific temper, a spirit of critical inquiry, and a mode of logical reasoning among our students, particularly at the undergraduate and postgraduate level. So it's nice when you are introduced by a student, and well done, I must say, and thank you for the rather exhaustive and exhausting introduction. Dignitaries, a very good morning to the dignitaries, to the Honorable Vice Chancellor who was with us a couple of minutes back, to the principals of the 2 collaborating colleges, the heads of the departments, the organizing secretaries, the members of the coordination team, and of course, my fellow resource speakers, guest speakers, as well as my dear participants. I think this is not the first nor the last workshop on what we call a faculty development program on research writing and research methodology. I mean, in the last couple of years, ever since the pandemic struck and everything, we had to shift, or we had to migrate our entire curriculum from an offline method mode to an online mode. Research workshops and on research writings, on academic writings and research methodologies, on interdisciplinary research has been, shall I say, almost pandemic, as viral as the COVID. And but I think with the impetus, as some of our distinguished speakers have mentioned, and I'm alert to what they said, is that ever since the National Education Policy came out with its recommendations in 2020, and one of the major thrust areas that the NAP sort of focused or highlighted was to introduce research orientation both at the UG level with a 4-year degree program, as well as establishing research centers in PG colleges and universities. And I think that is the key, because when we think of research, in fact, going back to what again the previous speakers have said, I I I I sort of didn't fail to recognize that many of them talked about, research in terms of culinary practices, in terms of food, talking about how research is at a fundamental level. A research is a mixing or a combining or a blending of previously known ingredients into a new recipe. And then the Honorable Vice Chancellor also wished the organizers that this FDP should turn into, or promises to be, a feast of ideas on research. So, taking the metaphors that the previous speakers have used in terms of food, in terms of cuisines, and in terms of feasting, um, I think, it reminded me of Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman. I'm sure many of us would have heard about the Feynman lectures, which are considered Feynman. By the way, Richard Feynman. When we talk about Richard Feynman, we he was a man of physics, in fact, and the Feynman lectures that I'm referring to are considered a classic in creative teaching uh, in physics. Richard Feynman, if I remember correctly. He was a Nobel Prize. He won the Nobel Prize for physics in somewhere in the 1960s, and subsequent to his winning the Nobel Prize, he was requested uh, to design and deliver an introductory course to undergraduate students in the California University of Technology, Caltech. Why? I mean, this is I like to begin my talk with this kind of an anecdote because I'm reminded exactly what the NEP envisages in terms of introducing research at the undergraduate and PG level, and what Feynman was doing, or rather what Caltech was doing. So when Caltech approached Richard Feynman to design and deliver an introductory course on to undergraduate syllabus, the board wanted Feynman to share, and this is important, friends. The board wanted Feynman to share his breakthrough research on quantum physics with undergraduate students. So the purpose being that so that the students could inculcate a critical and inquiring mind from the very start of a college program, of an undergraduate program. Now, what followed was something extraordinary. I think was something extraordinary because Feynman's the lectures that he delivered on the basis of this course that he designed, and remember, we are talking about a Nobel Prize winner in physics. So Feynman's lecture became a super duper hit with students, with his own students at Caltech, with the faculty, and very soon they became viral across American campuses, all American campuses, because the lectures were recorded, because a team of physicists, fellow scholars, and fellow scientists, along with students across, some of the best American universities, put together his lectures in a manuscript form because they were recorded. So they sort of transcribed it in a manuscript, and then published Feynman's what would become the iconic or the cult book or the cult text called the Feynman Lectures. Now, what is extraordinary again is the fact that Feynman, and this is where the connection, I'm drawing the connection for all those who are with us in this virtual platform. What seems to be extraordinary is this fact that Feynman could simplify. Now, we're talking about a Nobel Prize winner. We're talking about how Feynman could simplify and make even undergraduate students understand his research findings. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing that Feynman could simplify and make his own findings on something as complex as quantum physics and make his undergraduate students understand his research findings, and that he could convey these findings of his own research in physics in a language in a language it. No wonder the Feynman lectures, as they were called, his lectures, creative, imaginative, popular, full of beans, made the world acknowledge him as an extraordinary teacher among physics researchers, as an extraordinary researcher among, or an extraordinary teacher among physics researchers. Friends, this came to my mind. I was reminded of Feynman precisely because it sort of raises some of the issues and concerns I personally have about research academia in India, research writing in an Indian context. Some of these concerns are already some, I think, that comes across in all our minds. For example, how original is our research? Is our research original? Is our research interesting? Is it really breaking, particularly in the humanities and particularly in the subject of in the disciplic level, since it's an FDP on back to basics? Is our research writing even readable? Is it readable? Can we, like Feynman, can our researchers like Feynman make our research understandable to our students? Is the writing style of researchers clear, lucid, and communicable, or are we as researchers, as paper tigers, merely stalking Google in the search for API scores and for our CAS promotion? I mean, these are some of the things by poor academic writing. Quality wise, and I'm talking only about writing, I'm talking about the stylistic features of writing. And two things. I mean, I've been a researcher and a research examiner and supervisor for quite some time, and purely based on my experience, of having read through a lot of papers, research papers, as well as PhD theses. Uh, what would I say? What comes to my mind is that when I talk about, two flaws, two common reasons I feel that actually contributes to the poor quality of research in India, so far as academic style and writing is concerned. One is I think is ambiguity, and the other is redundancy. Ambiguity and redundancy, and ambiguity as especially when we are doing 7 types of ambiguity in the class, we're reminded of that session. Ambiguity can be good and ambiguity can be bad. We are talking about this when we talk about English studies, we are talking about polyphonic and multivocality of meanings, etc., etc. But ambiguity, when we refer to ambiguity in terms of the writing style of research papers and theses, ambiguity simply means arises when a researcher is writing in a style that is not clear and precise. And redundancy is the result of using superfluous words that make writing difficult to read and understand. And I'll give you an instance, yeah, and which reminds me. Can I share my? I've got a few things that I would like to show you. Can I share my screen?
Sir, yes, sir.
Just give me a minute. Please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, sir. Screen is visible, sir.
Thanks. All right. So, friends, this is the title of my talk, Are You a Paper Tiger? Academia, Research, and the Craft of Writing. And what I was saying was that is the is what contributes, or what makes for the poor quality of generally of research writing in India. And I'm talking only in terms of the academic style. Are two factors, are two reasons. One is ambiguity, and the other is redundancy. I randomly, searched on the net, and I found I randomly selected what you see on your slide, Research and High Style, two titles. The first one, if you take a look at the first one, it says language acquisition through social media discussions, potential of semantic network representations, and effect of conceptual facilitation restrictiveness. I mean, even as I'm trying, no matter how many times I've read this title, each time, and even as I'm reading it aloud right now, I'm probably I stand the risk of breaking my teeth here. It's, I mean, for all the words that are put in this title, I would say the title itself makes the entire paper, if it is a paper or a thesis, very, very off-putting, because when I look at the title of it, I find that it's what our grammar, what our teacher of grammar, English grammar in school would say. They never write a sentence which is full of compound words or compound nouns, compound nouns and complex phrases, and put some verbs, please, for God's sake, put some verbs there, because verbs turn your sentence from passive to active. And what I find singularly lacking in a title which sounds very, very high and absolutely heavy is a series of compound nouns like language acquisition and social media discussions, semantic network representations, conceptual facilitation restrictiveness, and what I find is a singular lack of verbs here. So, I mean, in my opinion, and you may disagree with me, this is the kind of writing style which is not an exception. This title and the way in which the title or the subject of the researcher's research has been framed or phrased is something which is not the exception but the norm. I mean, there is unfortunately a trend where Indian researchers tend to feel that in order to make their papers seem rather heavy, and to be written in a high style, they need to put their ideas and arguments in a high style. And by high style, I mean precisely the kind of style where one really has to read and reread and reread in order to in trying to make sense of whatever the researcher is trying to say. It's like the Peanuts cartoon that I once read, where a character says that I realize, I realize that the purpose of writing is to inflate weak ideas, obscure, obscure poor reasoning, and inhibit clarity. Yeah, that's how I think I remember the Peanuts character, the cartoon in the cartoon says inhibit clarity. But then, you and I are researchers, and there are some young scholars I noticed that they have also joined, and especially for them, if you have ideas, if you the purpose is that if you're findings, and if you are excited and passionate about as a researcher across the streams, as a researcher, you only would want to disseminate the findings. You want to share and circulate and disseminate the findings of your research. The academia, you want to be people, within the pages of a journal, which probably only a minuscule academic community of comprising of maybe your your supervisor. I mean, as a researcher, you do want your research, your analysis, your different articulated for others to read and thereby you contribute to that discourse. You contribute to the discourse, to the. I feel very strongly about it when I say that, and that is what makes me say that intellectual pedantry of the kind that you see on the slide, intellectual pedantry is the bane of good research. And therefore, in order to make your research, we want our research to be read. We want our research to be talked about, to be discussed. We want our research to be cited, and to be referenced. And if that, and herein comes your KPI scores and your CAS. So even in order to move ahead in your in your profession, in your career, you want to do research which is talked about, which is written about. And in order to make that, you need to write in a style which will make your research reader friendly. You must cultivate a style of writing that is inviting, that is engaging. How you know I'm reminded again, what you see on the slide is what is generally called in research as an audacious hoax. This is what is called the Sokal affair in research. In the 1990s, in the 1990s, Alan Sokal, who was a professor of physics at the at New York State University, was sort of frustrated by the kind of research that was coming out in some of the best journals, whether it was scientific journals like Nature, or a journal like Social Text, considered to be one of the or uh, 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 one of the landmark journals in social sciences and humanities. And so he was generally frustrated by the quality of writing, by the kind of dense and obtuse style of writing that researchers were adopting in order to put forth, in order to submit their findings. And so, as a result, what actually started as on a note of annoyance and piquance, Alan Sokal decided to play a hoax. Yes, you heard me right. He was a respected, remember, he was a respected professor of physics. Well, I seem to be giving you examples all from physics, but he was a respected and a very reputed scholar in the field of physics. And what he did was he he sort of he wrote a paper not on his subject but on social science. What he wrote about, what the subject was, is not important. But what is important, and this is what I'm trying to draw your attention to, is that he wrote in a style where on social sciences, copying and imitating, or you could even say parodying, a style which had the right phraseology, which had the critical register, which had the right critical register and phraseology of a social of the right of the writing style in social sciences. And then he sort of glossed his own ideas, which in social science, what we call in academic jargon. Now, what Sokal did next was to send off this Jabberwocky, this this what he calls research paper in a gobbledygook language, to Social Text. And remember, I said Social Text was one of the prestigious academic journals at that time. In fact, at one point in time, it was the publishing essays and papers written by the leading intellectuals of that particular time, including Edward Said, and Frederick Jameson himself was one of the editors. And guess what? Alan Sokal, who wrote a social science essay putting forth nonsense ideas. Basically, it was a nonsense paper, but then putting it all together in a style using a register which seemed to be heavy, and high. And guess what? Social Text, the editors of Social Text actually accepted his research paper and published. Well, after it was published, Sokal actually came out and publicly admitted that he had played a trick. He had played an academic trick, and actually, the paper, his own paper, he confessed, amounted to really nothing. And this is what he said, what you see on your slide. He said, I decided to try a modest, though admittedly uncontrolled experiment Would a leading North American journal of culture studies, whose editorial collective included such luminaries as Frederick Jameson and Andrew Ross, could they publish an article that was liberally salted with nonsense? Notice the word. These are his words. Liberally salted with nonsense if A, it sounded good, and B, it flattered the editor's ideological preconceptions. Well, friends, this is precisely the point that I'm making, that much of academic writing in the area of English studies in India is dogged by poor style of writing, or what is considered to be what looks to be a very pedantic style. Because, friends, research writing and research itself are complementary. They go together. And a clear, cogent academic style of writing is the sine qua non of research, and there can be no two arguments about it. Are you there with me? Are my slides moving?
Sir, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They are moving.
Good, good.
We are here,
Good.
sir.
This is the terrible thing about doing anything online. I mean, one doesn't know whether poor network or any technical
Right,
hitch has
right.
sort of dashed your whatever you're doing. So thank you for that
True,
note of
sir.
reassurance. You're surrendering to tautology. Critical analysis and inquiry is a given thing in research. So why write critical study? Anyway, our universities continue to churn out PhDs of this kind year after year, turning what I call academia lucida into academia obscura. I'm sorry I'm being a little hard hitting, but that is exactly I wish, because I wish to say a place before you, because I feel very strongly and passionately about research. So when one browses or take a look on the UGC or InflipNet, for example, which is one of the largest digital repositories of PhD thesis in the country. And when one browses through the list of PhD topics on the InflipNet, one might find, we find a number of theses on the Sashi Deshpande, Girish Karna, Jhumpa Lahiri. All of them simply, what I find is a recycling of previous work. Yeah, recycling of previous work. I mean, at its worst, such work is plagiarism of earlier bad research or poor research, or at its best, if you can even call it, it is plagiarism of good research work. But nonetheless, it is plagiarism. It is lifting and copying with a few cosmetic changes. And this is an unfortunate trend in English studies research, because research in English studies turns out it's not about reinventing the wheel. So much of the research that is being manufactured, and I'm deliberately using the word manufactured, out of Indian colleges and universities is merely doing nothing more than adding more trash to the research recycle bin. Friends, American philosopher and literary critic Kenneth Burke, uh, you know, once described a research paper. Now, what is a research paper? He said, doing research or writing a research paper is to engage in a conversation that may stretch back hundreds of years and include any number of other scholarly voices. When you're doing a research, when you do research, you are actually contributing to that conversation by making yourself an informed, intelligent participant in it. When you're doing research, when you are looking at a series of texts or a trend or a movement, well, you're not just a careful reader, but a historian. You become a historian of a text life. You become a historian of a trend or a movement. So, in contributing, according to Burke, when you contribute to that conversation by your research about a text, trend, or a movement, as a researcher, you are keeping those things alive, and not just the text, but the conversation, which is probably more important. Think about, for example, the reception. Think about Jean Rhys's White Sargasso Sea. ever since it came out in the 1960s. If you take a look at, it's interesting, it's very fascinating to read, to look at how a single text has been interpreted, analyzed, and written about in using different analytical frameworks and different critical lenses over a period in the past 40, 50 years. So if you take Jean Rees's White's Agasso Sea, which is often prescribed in our paper on post-colonial studies, um, it's interesting that in the 70s, when the book became when the book became one of the texts of uh, of critical discussion, it was hailed as a modernist text, both for its inventiveness of theme as well as in innovation in style and structure. In the 80s, when feminism was riding high on the wave of second wave, you had feminist critics, particularly Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubber, who were talking about White's Agasso Sea as a feminist text, as a feminist text that answers back to Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. And then in the early 1990s, or the late 80s and the early 1990s, the same book now was being reread and re-examined from a post-colonial lens. And today, when we study our university syllabus on post-colonial studies, actually makes this Rees's text as what we call a counter canonical text, as an example of a post-colonial text of writing back to the empire. The point really is that if as a researcher, if the reception, the reading of a particular text such as White's Agasso Sea itself demonstrates that how a text can never be interpreted all by its own. There are no closures to reading, and how in different periods down the ages, how a single text written by a Caribbean writer has been interpreted, has been the subject, or it has allowed so many different ways to be talked about. And that exactly is what research is, because research, as I said, is not reinventing the wheel. It is and search. So you keep on searching. You keep on searching as a researcher to find new facets, to find new dimensions, to to a topic which may already seem to be much talked about, or already done to death. Well, Shakespeare, is he really done to death? Every year, research still continues to come out on Shakespeare. So, what really is, if you are able to spot the difference, well, clearly the second bunch, representations of masculinity, all the second bunch of titles seem to suggest be clear. The research. So while doing my masters, one of my favorite poems was Wallace Stevens' 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird by Wallace Stevens. And in that particular poem, he had which was broken into 13 sections. You had one stanza which said, I was of three minds, I was of three minds, like a tree in which there are three blackbirds. Birds. Now, I find the poem and what Wallace Stevens does in the poem, providing a good analogy to the dilemma of the researcher, to the challenge. Let's not put it as a dilemma, to the challenge of a researcher, of a young researcher, or to point out what research is all about. You see, who just hears, who does her masters, often comes to me saying, that, sir, this is the first question. What should I choose first? Should I choose author? Should I choose approach? Or should I choose a text? Like, like the narrator in Wallace Stevens's poem, I was of three minds. The researcher is also in three minds. So it's very common for me to hear a young MA student telling me that, sir, I really like feminism or post-colonialism. So which writers or which text should I take up to apply this theory? Or the researcher or the young student saying, I'm super excited about Margaret Atwood after watching The Handmaid's Tale on Netflix. Can I take her up for research? Or, sir, I recently read an interview by Amitav Ghosh. So which theory can I apply to his works? Friends, this is what I call the cookie cutter approach. The cookie cutter approach. Researchers, who seem to already have a particular theory in mind and who want to apply it mechanically to whichever text comes along their way. Doing research, friends, is not riding your theoretical hobby horse. No, it isn't. It's very common, it's very common to read a paper where the researcher starts by describing by describing a theorist and his big ideas, then to return to a close reading of the text, because that's what we do in class also. And then at the end of the paper, more or less, the researcher says, it's like telling the reader, what? You know that idea from the big theorist that I told you about at the start? Well, it applies here. Reading such a paper is no one's idea of a good time. Not mine. Certainly not. Because, when using theory, one must use it as a genuine interlocutor, not as a voiceover. I'll repeat what I said. That when we use theory in praxis, one should be using that theory, that theoretical lens or that critical framework, whatever it is, whether it is feminism, post-colonialism, queer theory, whatever it is, whatever you dig. One should use that theoretical framework or the theoretical lens as a genuine interlocutor and not as a voiceover. One has to make that particular theory primary rather than secondary, so that when you're dealing with that theory in an engaged manner in the paper, you're not only modifying or contesting you also are modifying and contesting the theory as you go along, interpreting the text. Researcher, you don't want to some text why, but rather what I'm trying to make. So if you ask me, about breaking of myths, busting of myths. Curiously, it's a curious phenomena, curious paradox that in India, when we talk about research in the humanities, we seem to suggest that, that anyone wanting to do need to be even talking about a methodology. It's almost like saying that doing research in English studies is where the researcher can find his feet or find his way as he goes along. And the supervisor is the only one who already has this magic formula or this silver bullet. None of these statements on what you see on your slide are actually true. A lot of research methods can't be taught. You pick it up by doing it. False. And the best of supervisors cannot be a be-all and end-all for research. In fact, the best of researcher is somebody who relearns, no matter how much of an expert or a specialist he is in that particular area or discipline. But doing research with a researcher is for the supervisor, again, to begin with a clean slate. So if you ask me, what is What is the most difficult part of a research? Well, if you break down the processes or the components of research, well, any book will tell you that research as, one is identifying a research problem, formulating a research question or identifying a research problem, then formulating a hypothesis, then going back, doing a literature review, writing and citing. Well, which one of these is most difficult or most challenging? Well, all of them. If you think that it is difficult, it is difficult. The best advice that I can give to a young researcher is always, is to choose a subject close to your heart. I mean, if a young researcher, of course, one doesn't, it doesn't. I'm not generalizing, but generally, if a researcher is actually interested or wants to know, howsoever unlearned he may be, wants to know or wants is curious about a particular text, movement, analysis, well, that's the one that you start with. Or at least let the research topic be a challenge both for the guide as well as the scholar. A guide's job is not just to put signatures. No. In fact, Umberto Eco, in his book How to Write a Thesis, has a section. It has a section which is titled "How to Avoid Being Exploited by Your Advisor." how to avoid being exploited by your advisor. Advisor meaning, well, a supervisor. Because again, doing research or following a research methodology applies not just to the research scholar, but also to the research supervisor. And I think being a research supervisor requires as much training and skill, not just experience, but as much training and skill in research as a first time researcher. Because supervisors, friend, as we have seen, follow, or rather, Umberto Eco talks about two kinds of supervisors. In formulating a subject, in suggesting a topic, one, he says, are supervisors or advisors. He says those who recommend the topic that they have done research on. So while their own research is done and dusted, they would keep saying, do this, because and then give all the ready-made material. I know people in my own university where research supervisors have simply given the same author, the same text, and asked a young researcher, well, kar lo beta. Or a supervisor, Umberto Eco says, or a supervisor can recommend a topic that is unfamiliar or unknown, not just to the research scholar, but to even himself. In fact, Umberto Eco recommends the second kind of researcher, truly to be more honest, committed, and generous. Research, friends, is asking questions at the basic level, at the fundamental level. Doing research is asking questions, but then asking the right questions, perhaps, or questions is more important. Because asking the right questions leads to the identification of a research problem. It sets you off. It sets a young researcher off on finding answers. A researcher of mine wanted to work on Great Wall literature, and so when she came saying that she wanted to do research on World War I literature, I said that this particular topic or this particular subject has already been done to death. I mean, there have been libraries, and there are already libraries and libraries of research on it. But then seeing her enthuse, I said, I sort of said, come back to me, do a literature review, I said, and come back to me after to own homework, lead to any questions. And the first thing she said was, well, sir, when I did a survey of World War I literature, well, I didn't really find too many women writers. And then she said, I was intrigued whether, that the lack or the absence of women's writings in World War literature, was it because war was thought to be a man's thing? Battle, guns, courage, valor, heroism, all are supposed to be a man's domain, to fall into a man's domain. did it, and she further asked me, is it therefore that the entire canon of World War One literature, did it possibly suggest that women, is it really a sexist canon? Does it actually suggest that women don't really have the sensibility nor the experience or the imagination to write about war? And so we have a hypothesis. I said we have a hypothesis. A hypothesis, precisely what you said, you need to prove it wrong. And well, the story is that she went on to do her research on three women writers. She could find uh, I think Villa Carter, Edith Wharton, and Virginia Woolf, all of whom who had written prolifically on World War One literature, on World War One rather. So, when you think of research or the basics of research, nothing could be simpler than this four-stage process, four-step process. Topic X is important. A lot of research has been done on it. However, although nevertheless no work has been done on the Y aspect of it, and this paper or this thesis examines the Y aspect. In fact, the most important step really is the third one, which however, although nevertheless, that is the crucial component of a research paper, because that is the one that actually identifies a research gap. Are we doing good?
Yes, sir.
So any research that does not use step 3 is not research. Any paper that misses or skips step 3 is an article, or at best you could say it is a descriptive or an expository essay, not a research paper. So let's see what we have. Yeah. So when you are starting, look at what Professor Fenton says. He says, how important is research? What is at the core of research? Well, after you formulated a question, it is to state your thesis. Stating your thesis is very important. I personally, I like research papers. Or even student assignments, my own PG student assignments that begin something like this essay on Milton's poetry, or rather this essay reads Milton's poetry in order to argue. That's the first line I'm saying. I personally like those essays or student assignments which begin this way. This essay reads Milton's poetry or Milton's Paradise Lost in order to argue. Or somebody writing Christopher Nolan's Memento is a film on trauma which operates on 2 different levels. I like papers which begin on this note. Why? Well, for 2 reasons. One, it immediately demonstrates to me a higher skill in academic writing. It shows an awareness of academic style and how to structure a paper. Also, I like this kind of beginning in a research paper because it helps to sort of signpost. It helps to signpost for the reader on what is to come in the paper. Because the researcher is actually stating the thesis statement right in the beginning without beating about the bush. So as a researcher, when you're looking at how to structure your paper, I feel it's always good to tell the reader what is in your paper. And so a thesis statement actually is one that tells the reader where you are going, what you're going to argue, what you're going to argue about the topic, what is your topic, how are you going to argue about your topic, which method of analysis are you going to employ, and what aspects will you present and in what order. This is something that we probably teach in a journalism class, and the rule is the same. The 5 W questions and the H. Why, what, where, when, and how. And if you actually answer these questions when you are even framing, when you are making your first draft of a paper in the beginning itself, what is the paper about, how, that is, with what method are you going to deal with that subject, and when in the course of your paper you would make the reader interested in your paper. You would draw the reader's attention and have him riveted in your paper. In other words, you will make the paper reader friendly. And that is what I think research is. You need, as I said in the beginning, doing research is not just for yourself. Doing research is to disseminate, is to enter into a conversation, as Kenneth Burke says, and to start and to participate in a discourse or in a narrative that you make interesting by giving a fresh point, a unique perspective. So what is a good research topic? Well, books, any number of books will tell you novelty, relevance, interest, innovation, etc., etc. But the point really is to make it, to pinpoint it. Here are some examples of research titles which should immediately point out to you what makes a good research topic. Relevance, for example, relevance. I always ask my research scholars to look for topics that are topical, to look for research areas which are interdisciplinary. Like the first one, petrofiction. A student of mine is working on petrofiction. So this is a book that I recommend for all research scholars. Research Methods for English Studies, Gabriel Griffin's. This is an excellent book, friends, because in it, Gabriel Griffin proposes, she makes a distinction between research skills, methods, and methodologies. Things that we often confuse. We think skills, methods, and particularly methods and methodologies are the same. They are not. And that is what the book tells you or shows to you by giving to you specific examples. Do read this book. So when she talks about research skills, well, Griffin says research skills are about library skills, editorial skills, biographical skills, dissertation writing skills, or even IT skills. And research methods, on the other hand, she says, are how you carry on your research, how you carry out your research, rather. Whether the method that you employ is archival, whether you're going to do a historical research, going back to an archive, whether it is going to be discourse analysis, or are you going to use ethnographic methods like preparing a questionnaire or interview, or do you only is your research only about doing a textual analysis? So the choice of the research method will actually depend on the kind of research that one wants to do. So if I'm thinking, recently I was researching on a topic, post-coloniality, nationalism, and Bhadralok identity in contemporary Bengali poetry in English translation. Post-coloniality, nationalism, and Bhadralok identity in contemporary Bengali poetry in English translation. Now, it's quite evident from even from the topic that I'm going to be using translation and comparative methods of analysis. It also suggests that as a researcher, I may actually have to conduct interviews or go to libraries for doing archival study, and yet if this is the method, then the methodological framework that I will be using is that of post-colonialism or third world studies. So identifying your methodological approach is very important for research. Take a look at these three examples. Each one of them actually defines the methodology, the theoretical framework or the critical lens right in the beginning, using the definition of post-colonial subaltern cosmopolitanism given by etc., etc. I will argue that. Or my paper attempts to demonstrate that pandemic narratives in film setters. Or in each of these titles, what you will find is a clear statement, is a clear, direct, and straightforward statement of the thesis, giving to the reader, first of all, what the topic is, what the method will be, what the method employed will be, and what will be the overall methodological framework. You see, skills and methods can be, a researcher normally uses a combination of skills and methods, but whereas methodological approach tends to be often singular. So it always helps when you spell out your methodological approach at the very beginning as you investigate your research question, because it demonstrates your position, as I said, what, or rather what Kenneth Burke says, that research is an ongoing critical debate. One final thing about titles. Remember the one that I showed on the first slide, language acquisition through social media. These are precisely the kind of titles that in my opinion, you should avoid. Titles that are too heavy, titles that lack specificity, titles that even lack, language-wise, they lack verbs. Well, these are some of my own titles of my own papers, but you know, and I'm not for a minute suggesting that these are the best ones, but this is something that works for me. How to write a title, how to create a title is something that works for me. Because these titles follow a template. I follow a template, and that is, you'll find that there are, in most of these titles, there are two parts. There is an evocative title, the first part, and then the thing that follows the colon is a descriptive or a thematic subtitle. Friends, snappy titles, right? You know, remember, snappy titles help your abstract also to be noticed. So, you know, but at the same time, it comes with a caveat. Snappy titles, writing snappy titles are okay, but it also comes with a caveat with a writer. It's really what comes, if you're using the same template, you know, what comes before and after a colon, then a title such as All the World's a Ship, Race and Ethnicity in Moby Dick is eye-catching, but it's not a good title. A better title would be Melville's deconstruction of ethnicity in the midnight forecastle episode of Moby Dick. That is a better title, precisely because it is precise, it is concise, and it is specific. So the more specific you are in your title construction, the more clear you are in your thesis statement, the more you are promising to deliver to the reader what is interesting in your research. Because again, let me repeat, that research writing must be reader-centric. And so it is important, much as not only the body of your research, but also your title. Things to remember when writing a title. Well, these are self-explanatory, so you can just run your eyes. Any good book on research writing will give you this. There's nothing original on what I have put it. And a last one on, I always believe that doing research, writing a paper is like telling a story. And just as in storytelling, you need to begin your story by creating a hook that will grab the attention of the listener. In a similar way, if stories have good beginnings, should have good beginnings, they also should have good endings. And so is the case with papers, your research paper. It's important not only to have a good beginning, but also have a good ending. And there are two ways of ending. One is what I call the common way, which is in section A, summing up the essay. This is the beaten path, the path usually taken, where the researcher reworks the thesis, restates the points, or focuses on the significance of the essay, which means you are recapping for the reader, you are recapping what you have already put in the body of the paper. This is the first part, the common way. The common way, and this is something from my own paper. I don't want you to pay attention to what it is saying, but how it is saying. So it says, let me reiterate the two main contentions of my paper. First and second, using cardinals, I'm using first and second. So this is a very commonplace and usual method of concluding a paper. And the example is from one of my own essays, one of my own research publications. So this is the beaten path. Most researchers do it in this fashion. But there is another way to do it, and that is what good researchers, or rather great researchers, do. Not take the beaten path, but do something out of the box. And this, of course, many of us would be familiar with this Donna Haraway research paper, which ends in this fashion, which is not about concluding. This is not about concluding. In fact, um, she's not. In fact, she concludes by saying that there is no conclusion. So sometimes you can, you can even conclude that there is no conclusion. What I mean, therefore, to say is that you need to play around with your ending like you did with your beginning. As a researcher, have fun when you're doing research. Don't turn it into a kind of a toady exercise. Have fun. And why conclusions are important is because it's, after all, the last thing that your reader will see and read. So keep the energy level, keep the interest level going and sustain till the very end. Research is always researching. If research is always researching, then there are no final full stops to even a paper that you might have published or the thesis that you have completed. This is gold standard advice, once again from Umberto Eco, where, revising the paper is very, very important, because when as a paper writer, very often we seem to obsess about our writing. Once we have put our thoughts on page or on screen, we don't want to go back and rehash it because it's too much of an effort. But revising a paper is not simply error fixing. It's not about letting your Microsoft, whichever edition you're using, to do auto formatting and auto correcting. Revision actually means rethinking and rewriting. And so pound the paper. Do an Ezra pound on your paper. Keep revising, produce, keep writing. Turn out at least 3 drafts of your paper before you submit. Minimum 3 drafts. Because as a writer, as a researcher, you need to be your sharpest critic. If you get cheesed off, if you get bored by your own paper midway through, well, your readers are going to let out a yawn longer than a yarn. And finally, friends, one of the other silly mistake that many researchers do, follow the latest conventions, latest publication conventions. So whether it is the MLA 8th edition or whether it is the Chicago style manual, format your paper according to the guidelines provided by the publishing journal. You can't expect the editorial board of the journal to be doing that work for you. And formatting the paper also requires a skill. Well, we don't really have the time here, but that is something that needs to be learned. So, Kenneth Burke, once again. So it says, what is a research paper? A research paper is a piece of textual analysis that adds your critical voice to an ongoing conversation. And this is what we want truly. We don't want to be paper tigers. We don't want to be doing research only for the sake of API scores or CAS promotions. In research, if you really want to be into research, then you need to be passionate. You need to be engaged, and you need your own critical voice. You need to shape your critical voice as something that is rigorous, something that is engaging, and something that is innovative. You can't really put out your paper, like a paper tiger stalking Google. Nor should you be writing a paper which is nothing but Google research or Control C and Control V. So, friends, hopefully, you would have rethought your research, you would have gone back to your basics or done your basics to make your research truly a research, a wonderfully satisfying journey. Trust me, when you actually come out with a good paper, that journey itself is so rewarding and so enriching. So may your journey in research be always a satisfying journey, creating, much like Ulysses, looking for new ideas, looking for new horizons. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. It's really always a feast to listen to you, especially on research. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this wonderful lecture. Now, I would like the participants to ask for their queries, if there are any. You may raise your hand or unmute yourselves and ask.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sir, poems, stories, and novels are called creative writing. Can theses be also called creative in some other way?
Of course, absolutely. Absolutely. You see, anything that is a poem is an idea, a story works around an idea, and a thesis also works around an idea. And what is idea? At its very basic and fundamental level, an idea is not, it doesn't always have to be something that has never been thought before. In fact, what I began my introduction by saying, by referring to what the previous speakers had said, that an idea is something which actually is a combination of old things in a new style or a new fashion. So much of the thesis writing is creative. It is to bring to Shakespeare, after Shakespeare himself has become a sort of a brand name, to bring to Shakespeare an original point of view, looking at Shakespeare from a different location, bringing there's a researcher who's been working on Shakespeare in advertisement. Well, voila. I mean, that is bringing together creativity, imagination with critical thinking together. So when I say that no subject, as for a researcher, no subject has exhausted ever its creative or critical possibility. Nothing has yet been written, friend. You have to do it.
Yes, sir. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
sir. Any other question?
Sir?
Yeah, please.
Arya?
Yes, ma'am. What is the difference between creative writing and critical writing?
There's no difference. I just said so. I just pointed out to you. Well, the only difference, if you're actually splitting hair, then the only difference would be that in thesis writing or research writing, well, the analytical part perhaps plays more important. But I'm sure you've heard of lateral thinking, logic, thinking out of the box. We think of Edward de Bono's lateral thinking. Creative writing is to think out of the box, and so is critical writing. And many a times, the best of research comes not, and I say this, which is counterintuitive. I say this only because not every research which leads to a good paper is a step-by-step process. Well, one of the basics of doing research is to follow the rigorous structure of a step-by-step process that is in fact mandatory. But at the same time, research can also, you can come upon a topic, you can think about a well-worn topic in a new way, only because by chance or by accident. You see, Madame Curie discovered radium by accident. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin by accident, and a Bengali also invented rosogollas by accident. Sometimes the best creative ideas come out by a combination of your left brain and your right brain, not necessarily left or right. So creativity and critical thinking actually go hand in hand.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Any further queries?
Are there any questions in the chat?
Yes, sir. Sir, I just wanted to ask you some suggestions. As we have just introduced research methodology as a paper in our MA program, fourth semester, and the students in that paper, they need to write a research paper or project. They have to decide on a topic and write a paper. So what advice will you give to the student, because they don't have so much of time, sir, to, and they can't devote that much of time, they don't want to devote that much of time to read and write something, but they have to accomplish that task. So if you can give some
You know,
suggestion or advice to the students, sir, please.
okay, just as I said, there is a common way to conclude your paper, the common way, the uncommon way. There are two ways of doing what probably is an MA requirement, writing your assignment. Those of you who want to score, let's say, anywhere in the range of 10 to 12 in your internals, I don't know what your score is, well, do the common way. Go the common way, because that is what will get you. But if there is anything that you want to actually to make your mark and to make you remember the quality of a paper, saying, oh, that is a standout paper that somebody wrote, long after you've walked out of the portals of the campus, if people are still talking about a paper that you wrote as an MA student, well, that is doing the uncommon part. So it all depends again on the mindset, your approach. Look, good research, when you say good research, the word good, the adjective that qualifies research means hard work, not smart work. I'm not saying smart work, I'm saying hard work. And so good research requires extensive reading, and therefore there are no shortcuts.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Definitely, sir.
One thing I can also suggest, Neelu ma'am, I can suggest is, I can share the paper that I've designed on research methodology and academic writing skills with
Sure.
you, right? And maybe if you, that might give you some idea of what we do.
Yes, sir. That will be great. Thank you so much, sir. Please share.
Because we are also in the process of designing a curriculum in sync with NEP 2020. And currently we are working on that, revising both the UG as well as the PG curriculum. But this is a paper that I'm working on. I've already designed the paper, sort of the rough draft is ready. So if you want, I can share that
Please.
with you.
Yes, sir. Please share it, sir. Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I have a question in the same line as Nilu ma'am has asked for the assignment for students, MA students. I wanted to ask that whether we should go for the traditional authors or we should pick contemporary ones.
You know, Chandan sir,
Yes.
my first thing would be to suggest that why even pick an author? Pick a Netflix series. Pick the world of advertisement. Look at the graffiti on the walls. Let them not get fixated. Let us not slot them thinking that literature is only about text and authors. Anything that is meaning making in the world around us is a text. I mean, so when you do roll out bath with them, tell them that traffic signs can be a text, right? The clothes that we wear or the food, those, since we started today's session with so much of talk of food and feast, food studies is an emerging interdisciplinary approach to literature. And what better way to actually get a foodie, a researcher who's a foodie, to look at maybe food writing in literature. I'm working with a fellow researcher on illness narratives. Ever since the pandemic broke out, this is again a rich minefield of inviting interdisciplinary research. And one of my students recently registered on what we call medical humanities, and we are doing an analysis of illness narrative, the process of trauma, illness, trauma, and healing.
Thank you so much.
You see, give your young minds, give your young minds the freedom
Sir,
to not.
even the names that we use in the WhatsApp profiles or the status, that is also, I guess, the area of research that may be
Absolutely.
taken as a.
In my culture studies paper, I do take 4 sessions on what is a selfie.
Thank you so much, sir. Uh, any queries from any participant? Because sir has covered nearly all the areas related to research paper writing. Thank you, sir. So I guess there are no further queries. So I would like to invite Professor Manjari Singh. Yes, Chitra, madam, you want to say
Yes,
something?
yes. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us the clear vision for doing research. Sir, what is your advice for preparing PowerPoint presentation?
What is my advice? Have more power to your points and use your PowerPoint only as a prop. I'll repeat what I said. Have give to your points more power, give to your talking points more power, and use PowerPoint only as a prop.
Oh, sir, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. I would now invite Professor Manjari Singh for vote of thanks.
Very good afternoon, all of you. I think Sir has touched all the aspects of research since beginning from choosing a research topic to how to execute, how to draft a thesis. On behalf of my organizing team, it is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks to our distinguished guest for today. My heart fills with lots of gratitude and respect for Dr. Pantik Banerjee, sir, for not only sparing his invaluable time for us to grace and enlighten us with his commendable talk. Thank you very much, sir, for giving huge field and to teach huge field about research. And you gave means you gave a new path to do research in WhatsApp status, in about selfie, everything, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
So now we would move to the second session with the permission of our head, Dr. Anita Shankar, madam. Uh, Now I would like to call Arya Sahu, uh, a student of, again a student from MA 4th semester, uh, English literature from our institution. I would like to invite Arya Sahu to give a brief introduction of Professor I.D. Tiwari sir, our second speaker.
Good afternoon, one and all present here. I am Arya Sahu, student of MA English Literature, Government Digvijay College, Rajnandgaon. Taking up a workshop further, I, on behalf of everyone present here, heartily welcome our speaker, Professor I.D. Tiwari, sir. Professor I.D. Tiwari has 38 years of teaching and research experience. At present, he is professor and head of Department of English Faculty of Arts, Indira Sangeet University, Khairagarh. Dr. Tiwari also worked as professor and head of Department of English and Foreign Languages in Guru Ghansdas Central University, Bilaspur, for 5 years. He also rendered his services as Registrar of Central University Bilaspur for almost 2 years. He did his PhD in American English Literature on John Steinbeck He produced more than a dozen PhDs and written 7 books, about 20 articles, and 5 book reviews on language and literature. Areas of special interest of Professor Tiwari are Indian writing in English, digital humanities, Gandhian literature, as well as on interrelationship of culture and literature. He has presented his research papers in many national and international conferences. He has organized more than 20 national and 2 international conferences. Recently, before Corona, he organized an international conference on tribes of Chhattisgarh and First Nations of Canada. Professor Tiwari is associated with many national and international universities and institutes. He also edits and publishes research journals. He is the editor of Literary Discourses, an international journal of literature and art. His important research articles are Music as a Medium in a Suitable Boy, Ancient India, a Lighthouse of Knowledge. So, with all due respect, on behalf of Department of English, Government Digvijay College, Rajnandgaon, I would like to invite Professor Tiwari to deliver a speech on meaning and objectives of research.
Thank you, Manjari. You read it so well. Thanks a lot. And I must thank the host. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, you are audible.
So, outset, I would like to thank principal of the college, Rebecca Saab, who was an inspiration behind this organization, head of the department, and Professor Nelu Shrivastava, Soni ji, Anita Saab, and other individuals who have been associated with this very fruitful activity. I've been listening to the last lecture. He has covered almost everything. So there's nothing new which I will be talking about. But I've been given a title so that I may not cross that periphery, and we discuss the things within that orbit. I'll be in general talking about the problems which in real time and real space students are to face. I'm poor at computers, so it might take some time to open up my PPT. I have to bear with it. बुलाया क्या उसको? I've asked my aide to come and help me. In the meantime, we can talk about certain things like the basic question that comes to us is, what is research? Professor Banerjee has already discussed this point exhaustively. But let us very briefly discuss this point. And the topics that I will be touching upon are like meaning of research, objectives of research, a requirement of motivation in research, types of research, different research approaches, significance of research, research methods and research methodology, research and scientific methods, and the real process, how the research is done. And also, we, if time permits, we'll be discussing like, is really there any criteria for good research? And then at the end of the lecture, if time permits, we would be also discussing the problems that Indian students are to face while doing research. So we may begin with the meaning of research. So the first question that you may be asked or anybody asks is, what is research? Is research finding out something which is entirely new? Or inventing something which is not known so far? And then what role the predecessors played? Research is never done in vacuum. You cannot imagine a tree without roots. Likewise, you cannot imagine any good research without roots, that is, without pre-existing literature. So you need something Please wait for a second. I'm just doing certain things here. Go to screen. Visible now on the screen?
Yes, sir. Not great, sir.
So we were talking about the topics that we would be touching upon. And then I was talking about what does the research mean. The research requires a base. There is no base, there can't be any research. Important researches which were done in the past. If I give the example of Darwin's research, that is origin of species. So after the origin of the species was written and it was published, everything in the world was changed. Science was changed, psychology was changed, literature was changed, everything was changed. But the wonderful thing that we need to remember is that Darwin took forward the research that was already done there. Darwin himself did not do any jadoo. He didn't do any miraculous search. He carried forward some of the fundamental researches that were done in the field of biology, marine biology, and other related subjects. And then the result was that book. After that, everything was changed. But for us who are doing researches which are not of fundamental nature, and this applies to all kinds of researches, whether it is Darwin's research, or it is Professor I.D. Tiwari's research, or anybody's research. There are certain fundamental rules. I would call that SOP of research that everyone has to follow. Then only you can reach some conclusion, you can draw certain things. So that's why it is said that it is a kind of investigation. Investigation into what? Into study of material and source. And this all is done in order to establish certain facts, so that you may derive certain conclusions. So for any research you need a problem, and that problem must be questioned. That's why I always say that in researches, doubt is more important than certainty. If you cannot doubt, if you cannot question, you can't research. So a good student is always a curious student. A good researcher is always an inquisitive mind, or he or she has inquisitive mind, a questioning mind. So I've given a chart here also. You can use this chart later on. These are the things that you require. And the question comes, what are the characteristics of research? So as I told you earlier, it is a systematic investigation. Before I move forward, I have a story to share with you. About 15 years ago, when I was to publish a research journal, I invited articles from my friends. That they send you articles, and then I gave some parameters that it should be in such and such, length, and MLA should be followed. This edition, 7th or 6th, whatever edition is the time. So I started getting articles. One article that I got from one of my junior friends, that was of 5 to 6 pages. He came out there and said that this is a very original research paper that I have prepared. So, but for me it was kind of useless exercise because it had no references. He told me that because it is very original, it is not supposed to have any reference at all. His article was so original that it did not require any reference at all. I rejected his article. And then I asked him that you come to me and I'll let you know what research is. Researchers are not supposed to write something which is very original and that cannot be questioned. Research is the continuation of an effort which was made by your predecessor. There are certain gaps. Filling the gap of periods between the two researches is also a kind of research. But in any way, you cannot create anything, you cannot talk about anything, especially in research in vacuum. It requires a base. You need to have certain material on the basis of which you need to follow certain threads. Problem should be there. Researcher is not supposed to create a problem. Researcher is supposed to find out a problem. Problems are always there. So as a researcher, you are not required to create a problem. That's not the task of the researcher. I was reading a book on RTI. So there I read somewhere, it's written there that as an officer, you are not supposed to create information for RTI. Somebody asks you that whether this information is there with you or not, you provide this paper and all that. You can say, yes, this information is not here. And the information that you are talking about is not relevant. You cannot create anything. Likewise in research also, you cannot create any problem. Problems are always there. But identifying that problem is the skill of the researcher, is the skill of the supervisor. My long experience of about 25, 30 years is as a research scholar and also as a supervisor is that a supervisor, if is well read, and a student, if is inquisitive, they can do wonders. But if a supervisor is not well read, and if a student is not inquisitive and curious, a research is going to be disastrous. It's not going to aid anything. Because as I've written here, good research follows a systematic approach to capture accuracy. And the analysis is based on logical reasoning and involves both inductive and deductive methods. Real-time data and knowledge is derived from actual observation. These are more about the researches which are done in the sciences. So there are certain things which are common in the researches which are done in the humanities and science both. But there are certain portions that might be more relevant to sciences. So, in some of the universities, there is a provision that when you write the thesis, in your conclusion you are to point out certain new topics of research that are related to your topic. That means a real research always opens more questions. It poses more questions than it gives an answer. You find an answer and then you pose so many questions in the research. Like you solve a problem, but in the meantime you find that there are certain related problems. There is some unusual noise. Please ask them to mute. Ask them to mute, please. Ask them to mute, please.
और इसका बैटरी नहीं है यार
Moderator, please ask them to mute. It's difficult to contribute. Please ask them to mute. So, it creates new questions. So, in some of the universities, they have a provision that new topics for research that might have popped up while doing your research. And of course, there are certain other criteria which are followed by the researchers. These things come under the characteristics But you need to be accurate. You need to be clear. You need to be unambiguous. There should not be any kind of ambiguity, confusion. So, then we move to the objective of research. This objective of research, as a matter of fact, is somehow related to the meaning of research. What is the meaning of research? So, what is the objective of any research? What could be the objective of any kind of research? To unearth something which is useful for an individual, group of people, or for humanity. It was dormant so far, which was already there, but it was not discovered so far. So, discovery of new facts. The objective of research is to discover something new. New what? New facts. Discovery of new facts. That was not known to the world. So, it could be, and the subjects are different, fields are different, so objective of research will also be different. Like one of the objectives could be, there could be many objectives, 3 or 4 objectives I have pointed out. To familiarize yourself with the phenomenon, or to achieve new insight into it, or to portray accurately the characteristics of a particular individual, situation, or a group. Such researches are known as descriptive researches. And then to determine the frequency with which something occurs or with which it is associated with something else. In medical science, such type of studies are known as diagnostic studies, diagnostic research. So, there are some other points as well, but finally you can say, why do we do researches? We do researches because the first thing that of course is very important. We do researches, at least students do researches to get degrees. There are some researches which are done in order to serve the society. But there are people, they do researches because that gives them intellectual joy. There are people, they love facing the problems and they do researches because they face challenges. Interestingly, if you study the history of researches, you will find most of the important researches, Dongreji, most of the important researches were done which were really useful for the entire humanity. They were done not in the universities and colleges, research institutes. They were done privately by individuals. And then, of course, it was funded and taken up by the government. So there are many reasons for what the researches are done. And my last convocation, one of my students who is 76 now, 75 plus, he was awarded the degree of PhD, he was given PhD degree. So the chief guest and others present there, they were very curious to know what is the age of this man. We told them he is 76.
Yes, correct.
So we were wondering for what he is doing research and how it is going to help him. Because my student is still there. Someone who does research at the age of 76, 77. You are not sure whether it is still there or not. Such researches are for what? Such researches are for intellectual or aesthetic satisfaction. Because it satisfies your aesthetic sense. Intellectually, you gain something. Psychologically speaking, if you enter into that, you will find that it's also a kind of relation. Finding out something, doing something. There's a kind of pleasure, and in certain cases, it is very addictive also. You cannot live without that pleasure. That's why you must have noticed in history that there are people, they have a dozen of patents in their names. They have discovered so many things. Why did they do? There's a psychological reason for that, because it gives them pleasure. And they cannot live without that pleasure. That's why they do it. It's very addictive. So researches are also addictive in certain cases. So, but the main purpose of doing research is to serve the humanity. All researches are meant for social welfare, for public welfare, for the welfare of the humanity. That's why in some of the universities, one head is there, one heading is there where the student has to write how this research is going to help the society. Because if it is not going to help the societies, this research is of no value at all. So I personally feel, and whenever I go to examine a student in Viva Voce examination, and I very often go for this, I always ask this question, that if you're doing research in English literature, for that matter in any allied subject, linguistics for that matter, or interdisciplinary research, collaborative research as such, then of what use is your research for others? How this research is going to help the society? And in most of the cases, the only answer is that this is not going to help the society, it is going to help the researcher, future researcher. So, in humanities, at least in literature, it becomes a little bit difficult to justify how this research is going to be helpful for the society. But that big question is always there, for that matter, how literature itself is going to help the society. It's not going to help the society directly. So, these are some of the reasons why we do that. Then there are types of researches, different types of researches. Descriptive research, that includes surveys and fact-finding inquiries of different types. The major purpose of descriptive research is description of the state of affairs as it exists at present. A descriptive method of research is one that describes the characteristics of phenomena, situation, or in social science and business research. We quite often use the term, for example, frequency of shopping, preferences of people, or similar data. You need to understand that descriptive versus analytical is important thing to understand what is the difference between them. So what do we do in that? In descriptive research, we understand a phenomena, we explain a phenomena, we develop a theory about phenomena, or we apply some theory in certain things. That again can be categorized into phenomenology, ethnography. But let us briefly discuss about what is analytical research. This is very important for the students of research, English literature, those who have chosen their topics and have registered themselves very recently. They need to understand this very clearly. That without critical thinking, you cannot do any research, not only descriptive. If you don't have critical thinking, you can't do any research. And critical thinking also is a kind of skill. The evaluation of facts and information related to the research being conducted. There are many senior friends who are now listening to me. And there are professors, they are listening to me. Our experience is that we have guided students on different topics, or we usually guide them on different topics. Like if I have supervised about 16 to 17 PhDs on different authors and different problems, so I must be a great scholar. A great scholar on all those topics on which I have supervised the PhD, but I am not. So how come that I supervise those PhDs, those researchers? It's because of this. Because we are supposed to have critical thinking. It's a kind of a skill. We know that this is a systematic thing, this is how it is being done. So we ask the students to certain basic things before going into research, and we help the student to evolve and develop critical thinking in himself or herself. And the rest of the work is done by the student himself or herself. That is how we do. So if the students do not have that critical thinking, they must develop. So what is this critical thinking? So to understand critical thinking, there are certain points that we need to have in our mind. That the first thing is that we should familiarize ourselves with the primary material. Like if somebody is to do research on tragedies of Shakespeare, or supposing that four great tragedies of Shakespeare. Now, what are those four great tragedies? Othello, Macbeth, Hamlet, and King Lear. These are the four great tragedies. Supposing that someone has to do some kind of research on these four great tragedies. So the first thing is that the student is supposed to have deep understanding of the text itself. And then the student must have gone at least through the fundamental researches which have been done on these four great tragedies. There are certain books on Shakespearean tragedy. One is supposed to read those basic books. And then one should also familiarize oneself with the recent researches that are being done on Shakespearean plays. Having done all that, he or she should try to find out the scope of any problem that is engaged with, and how far he is able to find out or she is able to find out the solution of his or her problem in light of the material that has already existed there, the researches that have already been done, and how the solution that the student has to come with by the recent, very recent researches and the researches that have already been done. So this all, having knowledge of all these things, that comes under critical thinking. Questioning and then answering those questions. Because when you answer a question, some more questions come up. In context of what is already there and what is being done. As have been described in the next point in analytical research. On the other hand, the researcher has to use facts or information already available and analyze these to make a critical evaluation of the material. In literature, mostly we do analytical research. And it's conducted in a variety of ways, including literary research, public opinion, scientific trials, and meta-analysis. Within analytical research, articles, data, and other important facts that pertain to a project is compiled. After the information is collected and evaluated, the sources are used to prove a kind of hypothesis on. So it's a my reference that I would be talking about the researches which are done in literature and other art forms. That students face a lot of problems. But when we talk about the analytical researches, we need to have one thing in mind. That nowadays analytical researches are done with the help of computers. There are certain websites and there are certain algorithms that help us to analyze the data. For example, I give you an example. Like if somebody is to do research on the entire literature of Shakespeare, that is 36 plays and the sonnets and other things that he has written, that has been written by him. Now, it was impossible about 50 years ago to do research on the entire Shakespearean body of literature. But now it is quite easy and it's quite interesting also, because there are algorithms, you apply those algorithms, and the researches that could have been done by 100 researchers in 100 years, that can be done in an hour by a single algorithm sitting on computer. So, we who are doing researches in literature and social sciences are far, far away from the technology that is being used in the test and in some of the premier institutes of India as well. So the students and the researchers especially, they need to understand these things, that in such kind of researches, use of computers, that has become very important, especially when
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you, sir. I think your speaker It's at the back side of your headphone. सर आपका जो कान में सर जो लगाया है
Okay, okay. Was
actually that is making noise when it is hitting the chair.
okay. Is
So
it all
yeah,
right now?
yeah. Now it's better, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, okay, okay. You could have suggested me much earlier.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
It's a new thing, because
Fine. Yeah,
we are used to
yeah. You are right, sir. You are right.
lecture, yes, on the dais and facing people, watching their,
True. True, sir.
watching
True,
their
sir.
facial reactions and all that. But
True, sir.
we are missing so many things, so many disapprovals through eyes and faces, and so many pretty faces that might be
Very true.
in the hall, etc. It's so boring, to lecture without looking at the faces. Anyway, it's a good that I had this kind of trouble, so that there was a little bit digression.
It's fine now. Fine now. Sir. It's fine. Thank
So,
you,
but
sir.
we are
So,
Carry on, sir.
attentively listening to you, sir.
so kind of you. Well, there is nothing new what I'm talking about,
And
but
no,
I'm
no,
trying to
sir, but
make it more interesting.
it's a source of great
No,
knowledge
See,
to
sir.
us.
nowadays we must think in the terms of collaborative researches.
True.
And
Yes.
in these collaborative researches, the researchers are not supposed to be uh, from one country, from one subject, from one climate. They're from different climates, from different countries, and they meet on social media platforms, and this is how they do the researches. Such kind of researches are done especially by the companies, big companies, multinational companies. They launch the projects, and they have a representation in that projects from different segments of humanity as it suits them, because they target the big markets. So any collaborative research in the field of astronomy, or in the field of social equity, or for that matter, something that relates to politics or democracy, can never be done without taking an Indian on the board. So an Indian is always there on the board. What kind of researches they do, that's okay. Because India is a big market. And then you must have heard about God particle. The kind of research that was done, it was done in perhaps Switzerland or in some country, in which thousands of researchers were involved, and they were from different countries. They were from India, they were from so many countries.
Yes, sir, yes,
So
sir.
in research, nowadays researches are overhauled totally. They are done in a different way, in an entirely different tone and texture. Libraries have become almost irrelevant, because there are online libraries. I'm not talking about the material which is accessible openly. I'm talking about the premier, universities that are available online. Oxford is available, Cambridge is available. That is Cambridge University Library, Oxford University Library. All these libraries are available online. So it's a sometimes I do feel that I insist that my students should go to the library and touch the books to have a personal feel. But now I'm realizing that it's nothing but the waste of time. Going to the library and sitting there in a very uncomfortable manner, being at the mercy of the card holder or the book lifter, it's always better to be on the screen and access to the wonderful libraries, world class libraries, where you can have all sorts of data collection, material, and everything. So it's a tip for the new students that they need not depend on their college libraries or their university libraries only. They must also get membership of online libraries, and then you can get the approval of your work from across the world if you can float it on the social media. Another important point that I would like to share with my students here now is that they are facing an entirely different kind of problem. The problem that we faced, but in a different way. 30 years ago, when we were doing research, there was, scarcity. All kinds of scarcity we faced. There were no books, and there were no research journals available. And for making bibliography, one has to go to the library and touch every book, because the librarian and the staff to collect the books, making notes, and then writing them in a very systematic manner. But nowadays, that is done with the click of your mouse. You can click and you can get the entire bibliography and all that. So we were facing the problem of scarcity. We did not have the things at all. But now the students are facing almost the same problem, but in a upside down manner. Like we did not have. That was a problem. They have too much. That is their problem. It's difficult for them to find out which book is important, more important. If I ask my student and go and find out a book on mythology, so they come out with a list of 10 books, and they are a little bit confused. Which book should I go for? Sometimes, as our supervisor, I am confused that which book should I recommend them, which book would be better for them, because there are so many books which even I did not know. So it's the students have moved and the times have moved from scarcity to abundance. This is not a less problem, that you are faced with the influx of so many information, where it is difficult to find out what is important for us and what is useful for your research. So in another way, if I'm allowed to say, is that the thing is not important. Thing is there, that I also, again, I know that the thing is there. So what is important? The location of the thing is important. The address of the thing is important. Where to find out? Thing is always there. This is very interesting. This is what research is about. Solutions are always there. You have to find out the solution. You don't create any solution at all. Solutions are there. You have to find out. So sometimes I wonder how the things have changed. There was a time when somebody had any new idea, he was always advised that, oh, this is good idea, and a very new research idea, don't share it with anybody. And it was a difficult task for us to hide our ideas. We always tried to shield our, protect our ideas from any kind of access as such. And the research guides also advised us, don't show your draft to anybody until it is being published or you are awarded. But now the times have changed. The moment you have any new idea, you are supposed to launch it on the Facebook or on any social platform. For what and why it is done? Because any idea which is of any importance belongs to the entire humanity. It is not for you alone, it is for everybody. Let people help you to solve that problem. Even after that, you will be having your copyright. You'll be authorized to own that. So this is an entirely new kind of era where we have entered. Yeah, we have talked about applied versus fundamental researches and all that. Now let us talk very briefly about what is fundamental research. We all know about pure and basic research. Knowledge's sake is termed as pure or basic research. So, in literature, we do not do fundamental research. Fundamental researches, they create theories, as a matter of fact. Although fundamental researches themselves are based on theories, they give birth to theories. Mostly they are concerned with natural phenomena or relating to pure mathematics. They come under fundamental researches. So the central aim of this applied research is another kind of research, is to discover a solution for some pressing practical problems, whereas basic research is directed towards finding information that has a broad base of application and thus add to the already existing organized body of scientific knowledge. This needs to be understood. Applied research is called, for me, it is very useful research. You have some problems, you need solution of those problems. And you try to find out the solution. This all comes under applied research. Unlike the basic research. Because in basic researches, you have broad based applications, but that again is not done in vacuum. You already have some organized or well organized body of scientific knowledge and you add something to that. It's always very difficult to find out something new in fundamental research. In social sciences, in applied sciences, it's a, mostly researches means, applied researches. Researches which are done for the purpose of benefit of people. As I told you, it is done especially in multinational companies and in smaller companies to find out uh, what is the mood of the consumer. But you need to remember that nowadays, all these researches are done in a very combined manner and with the help of very scientific and well taken up algorithms. I give you an example. Although it is very debatable point, have you ever noticed that you think of something and the solution, like if you have a problem in your mind, throughout the day you talk about it to your friends, sometimes you surf it and the telephone, that is your mobile and all that, and after a day or two you find solution in the mobile itself. Why? I have the gut feeling, and somebody told me also that if you are really talking about which is very secretive, you should switch off your mobile, because even if you are not talking, your mobile is on, mobile collects the data. Like this mobile is here, it is collecting the data, although it is not on. So there are certain algorithms, they are collecting data all the time. This I'm talking about, how these applied researches are being done. And then they set the mood. They decide what kind of chocolate you are going to eat, what kind of clothes you are going to wear, because this all is based on data. That's why it is said that the Fourth World War would be fought not for water, not for territory, but it will be fought only for data. So data is your new god.
Yes.
If
Yes,
you
sir.
if you have data, you can collect the things, you can do wonderful things. So data has become very important. In such kind of secretive things are even done in the applied researches. I sometimes wonder and question that principle of free will. Said that this is what Bible says, that Satan is not responsible for anything because you have free will. Even God is not responsible for anything because you have free will. Although the question of free will is debatable and free will itself is questionable. I give an example. I'm talking a little bit out of my orbit because it's very interesting, and that might help the student somewhere to, you know, somewhere in their research itself now. Like, our will itself is not free. We are forced to will and desire what the company wants. They tempt us. They force us to choose certain things. 10 times a day, 20 times a day, they send them messages, this is useful for you. This is useful for you. And my friends also tell me, no, this is useful for us. And then we make our choice. So our will is not free as a matter of fact. That's one thing. Another thing is that there are certain chemical reactions in our body, chemical equations in our body, which can be stimulated and directed with the help of medicine from outside. Sometimes you are aware of it, sometimes you are not aware. But that big company does that all. They provide you some medicines, and in that medicine, they can do that wonder also. So it's difficult now to do researches, fundamental researches and applied researches, without getting influenced from other factors and other sectors. So as a researcher, if you are not from the field of literature, these are some of the cautions that you need to bear in your mind and then proceed on your research path. But for the students of literature, I would say that these are some of the important things. You can read these things from books also, the types of research, what kind of researches are there, fundamental and applied researches, and all these things. But the thing is that as a researcher, you need to be very inquisitive, very curious, and you need to be very aware of what is happening around you in your field. So basic researches are really important. There's always debate, my friends who are from the field of biology and physics, they say that what you teach and what you do with the kind of knowledge you have is of no use to the society. Real knowledge is the knowledge of physics. Real knowledge is the knowledge of computers. Real knowledge is the knowledge of science itself. And sometimes I do feel that they are right because they change the world. But then at the same time, I'm talking about the basic researches, like the computer is the result of applied research, but it uses basic knowledge of mathematics. Like how a poor man becomes rich, what is it? Does it come under applied research or fundamental research? It comes under applied research. So that's a very interesting thing. Then we can talk about the quantitative versus qualitative research. We have a chart, beautiful chart here, problems and purposes. You can go through this chart. It's a very interesting chart. This I'll give to the department. The students can use it. Then we have talked about qualitative research. In qualitative research designs, we have talked in-depth interviews, observations, ethnography, case studies, project techniques, and all. And then certain points are there that might help you to understand the definition of qualitative research that also is given there. The conceptual and empirical is again there. You can understand it, you can read it. I'll be talking now about some of the problems that I really faced, while uh, guiding the students to find out the topic or to correct their topic, and how to chapterize the thesis. That, in fact, relates to so many things that we have talked about so far, and that we talked about by professors who will be delivering their lectures in the time to come. Like the problem of finding out the research topic, that's a big problem. Students usually come to the supervisor with a topic which is very wide. Like some of the students, they came with the topic which within that topic there could be 3 to 4 researchers. No, the topic was so wide. So why it happens? It happens because the student does not know the meaning of research. What is the meaning of research? And what are the characteristics of the research? The meaning of research is not to make a study of any big problem that is there, but at the first hand they do not know how to choose problem itself. They are not aware whether what they are finding it as a problem is a problem at all or not. In most cases it is not a problem. The title itself is a solution, while the PhD is to be done on the problem. That's one thing. It's a very serious thing that the students, before they decide the topic, must go to show the Ganga and find out that what are the topics on which the work has already been done. Otherwise, their situation would be that of Ramanujan. You know what happened with Ramanujan? He was a great mathematician from India. He had solved so many mathematical problems of world. And he sent it to Hardy, who was doing research in England. So Hardy went through all those things, equations and everything that he had sent. But he found that really there was something fundamentally good with the mind of that person who has sent these things, and invited him. There, Ramanujan came to know that 90% of his work that he has been engaged with has already been done by people. So he wasted his life. He did not have any guide, any supervisor who could have guided him, the gentleman, that the problem that you are dealing with is not a problem at all. This has already been solved. So you need to move out, you need to go ahead. So the first thing is you need to find out whether the topic that you have chosen is a topic at all or not, whether it is a problem or not, because topic means a problem. If it doesn't pose any problem, it's not a topic at all. So that's a big thing, I think that most of the topics that I approved of, about 22 topics I approved last month only. And I had to work very hard on those topics, discussing these students and trying to convince them that this is not the right kind of topic because it has no problem at all. Or you are solving a problem that has already been solved by many people. That's one thing that the research student has to find out. In certain cases, I found that even the supervisor were not aware of it. So the supervisors are also supposed to motivate the students, at least suggest them certain new areas where they can find out certain new problems. But in many cases, or let me say most of the cases, this is being done by the supervisors themselves. And it's better because the student is quite novice, he cannot do that. So once the topic is decided, the student must be sure of not what he is supposed to do. The student should also be very much sure of what he is not supposed to do in a research. That is the limitation of research. At IQAC Khairagarh, we have specially mentioned a head in there in the synopsis, limitations of the research. What are the things that you are not supposed to do? And that should be well defined in the beginning itself. Like if you are making a study of the protagonists of Shakespeare, so you need to find out how many protagonists you are going to take, whether you are going to exclude something or not. Or sometimes you are to study the fiction by some author, where you need to mention it well in advance, somewhere in a thesis, in the beginning itself, that you are not going to include short stories or travelogues for that matter. And your thesis is, this is the limitation of your thesis. So whether it is mentioned in your synopsis or not, you need to follow that. The third thing that again is very much important for every research student is that the synopsis that you have presented to the university is not the Bible, is not the Gita, that you cannot violate that. It is a synopsis, it's a kind of hypothesis that you have presented that might be proved wrong. So chapterization in the beginning itself is a kind of injustice to the student, because the student hasn't read the whole text. Even the guide hasn't read any texts in certain cases. So chapterization is being done there. That again is not good. I would suggest to the persons responsible in some of the universities, if they are listening to me, that chapterization should not be done in the synopsis in the beginning itself. It should be left to the student. They, along with the supervisor, they can develop it. They can again change the topics. So the topics that have been given and the chapterization with the headings and all that, that also can be changed later on, because as the you move on the journey, you come to know about so many things, about the geography of the place, about the history of the place. The climate also changes during the journey. Even in the physical sense, the journeys are to encounter these things. And the research is a long journey that sometimes runs into 5 years. The student is supposed to have perseverance. Even if a student is not very intelligent, if he has perseverance, he can do PhD. If you are not very intelligent, it's good, you can do with it. But if you don't have perseverance and patience, you can't do PhD. So these were some of the things that I wanted to talk about. I'll be talking about these things later on also, but I think for today it is too much now. And I have so many things to share and discuss that alas, the time is above. Much for providing me a chance to discuss some of my ideas, to share my ideas with you. Thank you very much. If you have any query, any questions, please come up with that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. You not only touched the literature, but you also dealt with a bit of science while discussing about the God particle, and of course about the data mining, the big data, and all. So I would like to call Professor Mahendra Singh again for a formal vote of thanks.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Rita Saha, ma'am. We are really enlightened with your lecture, sir. I, on behalf of the Digvijay College and entire organizing team, let me call it a fraternity of English here together, and on my own behalf, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to Dr. I.D. Tiwari, sir, for gracing and sharing with us his intellectual thoughts on research. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
And at And at last, I would like to express my gratitude to all the professors, associate professors, assistant professors, research scholars, and students for sparing their valuable time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
With the permission of our head, Dr. Anita Shankar Madam, I end this session for today and we all will meet tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you all. The feedback links have been sent in your mail addresses, so kindly fill the feedback forms every day. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Yes, Anita. Thank you.
स्ट्रीमिंग बंद कर दो वही